What would you do if a millionaire looked a blind man in the eyes and said, "Prove you're really blind"? That's exactly what happened in Judge Judy's courtroom, and the entire room fell into stunned silence. The millionaire thought he could humiliate an innocent man and walk away without consequences. But he had no idea Judge Judy was holding one document that would expose the truth, destroy his arrogance, and leave everyone in the courtroom fighting back tears. Stay until the end, because Judge Judy's unforgettable response became a lesson about respect, compassion, and justice that no one who witnessed it would ever forget. The courtroom fell completely silent when a millionaire pointed at a blind man and demanded, "If you're really blind, prove it." The audience gasped. But Judge Judy didn't react with anger. She simply reached for one document, and what happened next would become one of the most unforgettable moments ever seen inside a courtroom. The courtroom was packed long before the hearing began. Reporters filled the back rows with notebooks ready. Law students whispered quietly, hoping to witness another unforgettable courtroom lesson. Even the court officers sensed that today's hearing would be different. At the plaintiff's table sat Daniel Brooks, a 38-year-old music teacher who had been completely blind since a rare genetic eye disease stole his vision nearly 15 years earlier. He wore a neatly pressed navy blue suit and held a white cane across his lap. Beside him rested his loyal guide dog, Max. The golden retriever lay quietly at Daniel's feet, calm and perfectly trained despite the crowded courtroom. Daniel's face showed no anger, only quiet determination. Across the courtroom sat Charles Whitmore, a 57-year-old real estate millionaire known for building luxury shopping centers across the country. He had a reputation for winning every business dispute. People admired his success. Many feared his arrogance. Charles wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, a gold watch worth thousands of dollars, and polished leather shoes that reflected the courtroom lights. He leaned back confidently, smiling as if the outcome had already been decided. Judge Judy entered the courtroom. Everyone immediately stood. Charles adjusted his jacket with confidence. Daniel gently stood with Max guiding him into position. Judge Judy reviewed the thick case file before looking toward the plaintiff. "Mr. Brooks," she said kindly, "please explain why you've brought this case." Daniel stood slowly. Resting one hand on his cane, he spoke in a calm voice. "Your Honor, almost a year ago, Mr. Whitmore's company hired me as an accessibility consultant. My job was to make sure people with disabilities could safely use his new shopping center. I inspected every entrance. I walked every hallway. I tested elevators. I checked emergency exits. I helped improve parking areas. I even trained employees on how to assist customers with visual impairments." The courtroom listened carefully. Daniel continued. "I completed every task that was requested. The project opened successfully. But after the grand opening, my calls stopped being returned. My emails were ignored. And the payment I earned never came." Judge Judy nodded thoughtfully. "Do you have documentation supporting your claim?" Daniel smiled softly. "My attorney has organized everything." His attorney stood and handed the court clerk a thick binder. Inside were signed contracts, invoices, email conversations, project schedules, inspection reports, payment requests, and photographs documenting the work completed throughout the shopping center. Judge Judy examined each page carefully. Every invoice matched the contract. Every deadline had been met. Every email showed positive feedback from Charles's project managers. Several emails even praised Daniel's attention to detail. Judge Judy looked impressed. She turned toward Charles. "Mr. Whitmore, did your company hire Mr. Brooks?" Charles shrugged casually. My company hires dozens of consultants every year. I don't remember every individual. Judge Judy quietly lifted a signed agreement. This contract carries your signature. Charles barely glanced at it. My legal department handles paperwork. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. So you're telling this court? Your own signature carries no responsibility? A few spectators quietly smiled. Charles crossed his arms. I believe this lawsuit is simply an attempt to collect money my company doesn't owe. Daniel remained completely calm. He never interrupted. Judge Judy continued reading. Then she asked another question. Did your company use Mr. Brooks' accessibility recommendations? Charles answered without hesitation. Yes. So the shopping center includes his designs? Yes. And those improvements remain in place today? Charles nodded confidently. Of course. Judge Judy folded her hands. So your company accepted his work, used his recommendations, and benefited from his expertise? But never paid him. Charles smirked. Then, without warning, he laughed loudly. The sound echoed across the silent courtroom. He pointed directly toward Daniel. If everyone is supposed to believe this story, I think he should prove he's actually blind. A loud gasp swept through the gallery. Several spectators looked at one another in disbelief. One reporter slowly lowered his pen. Even Charles's own attorney looked embarrassed. Daniel lowered his head. He gently rested one hand on Max's back. The loyal guide dog remained perfectly still, sensing his owner's discomfort. Judge Judy slowly removed her reading glasses. She carefully placed them on the bench. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't show anger. Instead, she looked directly into Charles Whitmore's eyes. The silence inside the courtroom became almost unbearable. No one dared whisper. No one moved. Everyone knew Charles had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. And although Judge Judy hadn't spoken yet, the expression on her face made one thing perfectly clear. The next few moments were about to teach the millionaire a lesson that no amount of money could ever buy. The courtroom remained completely silent. Judge Judy looked directly at Charles Whitmore. Her expression never changed. Mr. Whitmore, I've heard many disrespectful comments in this courtroom. But questioning someone's disability without evidence is one of the worst. Charles folded his arms confidently. I'm simply asking for proof. Judge Judy nodded calmly. And fortunately for this court, we deal in facts, not assumptions. She reached for a thick medical file that had already been entered into evidence. The binder was filled with years of medical records from some of the country's leading eye specialists. Inside were retinal scans, vision examinations, hospital reports, specialist evaluations, and official government certifications confirming Daniel's permanent blindness. Judge Judy carefully held up one document. This report confirms Mr. Brooks has no functional vision. It also states his condition is permanent and irreversible. She slowly looked back toward Charles. Do you have any medical evidence that says otherwise? Charles hesitated. For the first time all morning, he seemed unsure of himself. No. Judge Judy nodded. So your accusation wasn't based on facts. It was based on your personal opinion. The courtroom remained silent. Charles shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Judge Judy continued reviewing the evidence. She then asked the court clerk to display several photographs on the courtroom monitor. Large images of Charles's luxury shopping center appeared on the screen. The audience immediately noticed the impressive accessibility features throughout the building. Bright yellow tactile walking paths guided visually impaired visitors safely through the entrances. Braille signs were mounted beside every office and restroom. Elevators included audio announcements for each floor. Handrails had been redesigned for easier use. Customer service counters had lowered sections to assist people with disabilities. Emergency exits included accessible warning systems. Judge Judy slowly pointed toward the photographs. Mr. Whitmore. These improvements increased access for customers with disabilities, didn't they? Charles quietly answered. Yes. And your company proudly advertised these improvements during the grand opening? Yes. Judge Judy nodded. So your company accepted Mr. Brooks' recommendations. You implemented every major improvement. You benefited from his expertise. And your business received positive publicity because of his work. She paused. But when it came time to honor your agreement, you refused to pay him. Charles lowered his eyes. His attorney quietly whispered something, but Charles remained silent. Judge Judy turned toward Daniel. Mr. Brooks. Why did you agree to take this project? Daniel smiled softly. His hand rested gently on Max's head. I've spent most of my adult life learning how difficult everyday places can be for people who cannot see. I accepted this project because I wanted children, parents, grandparents, everyone living with blindness, to walk into that shopping center without fear. He paused. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I wasn't asking for special treatment. I simply wanted to be treated fairly. The courtroom became emotional. Several spectators quietly wiped away tears. Even one of the court officers looked away for a moment. Judge Judy smiled warmly. Mr. Brooks. That may be the most honest statement I've heard all day. Daniel nodded politely. I believe everyone deserves the chance to contribute. And everyone deserves to be paid for honest work. The courtroom filled with quiet applause before Judge Judy signaled for order. She looked back toward Charles. Mr. Whitmore. You questioned this man's blindness. But after hearing his testimony, I'm beginning to question something else. Charles looked up nervously. Judge Judy folded her hands. I'm questioning whether you ever truly saw the value of the person sitting in front of you. The words echoed through the silent courtroom. Charles slowly lowered his head. The confidence that had filled his face only minutes earlier had completely vanished. For the first time that morning, the millionaire realized this case was no longer just about 180,000. It was about honesty, respect, and the consequences of judging someone before knowing their story. Everyone in the courtroom could feel that Judge Judy's final decision, and her unforgettable lesson, was only moments away. The courtroom remained completely silent. No one whispered. No one moved. Judge Judy carefully closed the thick case file and folded her hands on the bench. She looked directly at Charles Whitmore. Her voice was calm, but every word carried unmistakable weight. Mr. Whitmore. You asked this man to prove he was blind. She paused for several seconds. Then she continued. But today, the only person who failed to see the truth was you. A wave of silence swept across the courtroom. Charles slowly lowered his eyes. Judge Judy continued. Blindness is not measured by eyesight. It's measured by the inability to recognize honesty, to recognize dignity, and to recognize the value of another human being. The audience listened without making a sound. Judge Judy reached for the signed consulting agreement. She carefully held it up. This contract is valid. It contains your signature. It clearly states the agreed payment. The work was completed. The recommendations were accepted. The shopping center implemented those recommendations. And your business benefited from every one of them. She looked directly at Charles. You advertised these accessibility improvements. You welcomed thousands of customers. You praised your company's commitment to inclusion. But the very man whose expertise made those improvements possible was never paid. Charles swallowed hard. His confident smile had disappeared completely. Judge Judy continued. This case isn't complicated. The evidence speaks for itself. She reviewed the financial documents one final time. The plaintiff fulfilled every obligation under the agreement. The defendant accepted the work. The defendant benefited financially. And payment was wrongfully withheld. She reached for her gavel. My judgment is for the plaintiff. Judge Judy ordered Charles Whitmore to pay Daniel Brooks the full $180,000. Together with allowable court costs and applicable interest. The courtroom erupted into applause. Several spectators stood to their feet. Daniel remained quiet. Tears slowly rolled down his face. He reached down and gently stroked Max's head. The loyal guide dog rested calmly beside him, as though sensing the emotional moment. Daniel smiled softly. Thank you, Your Honor. Judge Judy smiled back. No, Mr. Brooks. Thank you. She looked around the courtroom. You've reminded every person here that true strength isn't measured by what we can see. It's measured by perseverance. By integrity. And by refusing to let hardship define who we become. Many people in the gallery quietly wiped away tears. Even Charles's attorney looked deeply moved. After several moments, Charles slowly stood. He looked toward Daniel. His voice was far quieter than before. I'm sorry. I judged you before I knew your story. I questioned your honesty. And I treated you without the respect you deserve. I was wrong. Daniel remained silent for a moment. Then he smiled gently. I accept your apology. I only hope that next time you choose compassion before making assumptions. Charles nodded. I will. Judge Judy looked at both men. This courtroom isn't only a place where disputes are resolved. It's also a place where people have the opportunity to learn. She paused before delivering one final message. Never measure someone's value by what they can or cannot do. Character is far more important than appearance. And the greatest disabilities are often found in hearts that refuse to show kindness. The courtroom stood together in applause. Judge Judy struck the gavel one final time. Case closed. As Daniel stood to leave, Max gently guided him toward the courtroom doors. The spectators instinctively stepped aside, creating a clear path. Several people quietly thanked Daniel for sharing his story. Outside the courthouse, Daniel paused for a moment. He smiled as the warm sunlight touched his face. Although he couldn't see the crowd around him, he could hear something even more meaningful. Respect. Inside the courtroom, Judge Judy watched him leave before quietly saying one final sentence that no one present would ever forget. The strongest people aren't always the ones who can see the world, they're the ones who help the world see kindness. That day, the courtroom didn't simply witness justice. It witnessed compassion, accountability, and a reminder that true vision comes not from our eyes, but from our hearts.